back to WHIP, Philadelphia's #1 college radio station. On the line with us, we have a very special guest today. I want to thank Max Rappaport for joining us. He's formerly a writer at Sixers.com, and you can follow his Twitter at Max Rappaport. Max, thank you so much for giving us a moment of your time today.
Max, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you. Now let's hop right into it. Obviously, you have Jahlil Okafor, you have Joel Embiid, you have Nerlens Noel. How are these guys going to click together?
Well, I think right off the bat, obviously Joel Embiid's out for this whole year. I think, honestly, Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor fit a lot better than I think people expected coming in. I think you've seen that through the games they've played together, the 3 games they've played together so far. I think it's a natural fit for those two because they're both really good passers. Obviously, a lot of people are focused on, spreading the floor, and neither of them really being great outside of 12, 13 feet. But I think you have two guys that have the vision they do, and especially a guy like Nerlens Noel backing up Joel Okafor as, rim protector and a guy who can help. I think that helps Okafor a lot. I'm really excited to see how that pans out. And then, you look ahead, and I guess next year is when you have to start worrying about how you fit Joel Embiid into that. But I think at this point, you really can't think that way with Embiid. You really just have to see him play. And we haven't done that yet. And, it's still a huge question mark. His health moving forward, and even when he is healthy, what kind of minutes restriction he's on. He might be a guy who maybe you're resting on back-to-backs early on. So I think we're probably a while out from that.
Yeah, historically, a big center, 7-footer, with foot problems, multiple foot problems, and back problems, they don't pan out too well in the NBA. Based on what you've seen at practice or what have you, what do you foresee out of Joel Embiid?
Honestly, you don't see a lot because he's held out up until pretty recently. I guess it was in, April, May. June is when he started working out more. At that point, the season's over. Really, it was a private workout. The stuff I saw before games, the stuff I saw, obviously, when he was at Kansas, he's an incredibly talented player and a guy that, frankly, of all the players on the roster and all the, you project ahead to where they'll pick in the draft next year, he might be the guy who has the most, the highest ceiling of any of those guys. Obviously they got him at 3 because of those issues. I think he was going to go first overall had it not been for those injuries. And I think it's scary because, when you start talking about Zydrunas Ilgauskas being the best case scenario for a guy like Joel Embiid, that's good. He was a multiple-time All-Star. He's a very good player for a long time, but he missed a ton of time and, started breaking down a lot earlier because of those injuries, and you just hope that maybe Okafor can be the exception, can be the guy more like, less like a Yao Ming and more like a Michael Jordan who had the same injury early on in his career. Obviously not a big man, but had that injury early in his career and never popped up again. And you're hoping because the Sixers have been so cautious of him and he'll have sat 2 years and really taken a lot of strain off his body, maybe that'll help too. But it's just so hard to project at this point.
It is definitely hard to project at this point, but I'm gonna keep asking you about projections. The Sixers took Joel Embiid ahead of Julius Randle, a guy I really wanted back in the 2013 draft, I believe. Who would you rather have going forward? I'm just curious.
I'd rather have Joel Embiid, and I might sound silly now, but I think it's easy to look back now and say, well, he's in the first 2 seasons, and start looking at the guys they should have taken. But maybe if there was a guy, who dropped in that draft, if there was a guy like Rudy Gobert or Giannis Antetokounmpo or even like Nerlens Noel who dropped farther than you would have expected and has really panned out, I might feel that way. But right now, you look at Marcus Smart, you look at Dante Exum. I like Julius Randle, but none of these guys have really shown that they can be that franchise alternate player. And I think even if Embiid, his chances are way lower simply because of the injuries. I think you have to look at where the Sixers are right now, and I think you've talked about it a lot, but this rebuild basically is going to last until they find that player that you can build around and that's going to attract other stars. And until you get your Anthony Davis, until you get your Andrew Wiggins or whoever, you're really, that has to be the first domino to fall. And I think Joel Embiid still has more of a chance of being that, even though he has probably the highest bust potential of any of those guys drafted in the top 10. I still think he has the highest percentage chance of the guys selected below him to be a star and be like a perennial all-star player.
Speaking of the draft, who do you have your eyes on this season going into the 2016 NBA draft?
I'm a guy who, I'm always looking ahead. Obviously, Ben Simmons is a big name. I like him a lot, and I'm really excited to watch more of him because, frankly, like I don't really get a great sense of these guys until they start playing college, simply because the highlight reels you watch make everyone look fantastic and looks like they can do everything in college in high school just because you're not seeing full games. And I've been able to find some full games of these guys on YouTube, but like even that, the level of competition is so bad. Ben Simmons just looks like a natural talent. I mean, he's like 6'10". He's super fast. I mean, he basically plays like LeBron James without like that otherworldly athleticism. Even though he is really athletic. He's a very athletic player. I like Jaylen Brown.
That is high praise for Ben Simmons, by the way. That is enormous praise for Ben Simmons.
I mean, I think that's fair though. I think he's been almost in the way Okafor was. He's been talked about for the last 5 or 6 years. He's the top guy in this class. Maybe I hate using LeBron James' name because I think that's just nobody is going to be LeBron James in this draft or in the next draft. But maybe a guy like Grant Hill is a better comparison. Like Grant Hill, had he not gotten hurt, he can just do everything. And if he could learn how to shoot, that would be the one thing. And I think that opens up his game a lot. Like I was saying, I like Jaylen Brown a lot. He almost reminds me a little bit of Wiggins, but without the hype coming in. Jamal Murray's another guy I like, the guard from Canada. Chris Dunn from Providence. I'm excited to see what he can do this year. I was really hoping he would come out last year. This was before the lottery. I was hoping the Sixers would get that second pick from the Heat and maybe be able to take him there. I think who else? I mean, Dragon Bender's obviously a guy that people have been talking about recently. I honestly don't know enough about him. He's playing for Maccabi Tel Aviv. I think he's playing for not Haifa. I think it's Tel Aviv he's playing for. So I mean, there was that one game that was televised on ESPN this year, but other than that, I haven't seen him at all. I'm probably more excited for this class than last year's class, just because I think there are more potential top of the line. There's more top of the line talent, and with where the Sixers project for their own pick, having the Kings swap, for the Lakers pick, which I think will probably be in that like 5, 6, 7 range. I think you could make a pretty big. You could make a couple nice picks, or even be in a position to trade up using your own pick and the Lakers pick would be awesome.
Taking it a step further, let's talk high school. There is an enormous niche of basketball fans in Philadelphia, in the city that I am biased, sure, but I truly believe it is the best basketball city in the country. The pro talent is great, and more importantly, the game at the high school and college level is just really unparalleled. Who do you see, and you said before you don't really get a good read on these guys until they go to college, but who do you see moving on from high school that could make an impression on you in college from the Philadelphia area?
That's a tough question because, honestly, I've been so wrapped up, and I guess that'll change now, now that I'm out of the Sixers gig, but I've been so wrapped up in pro ball and in beyond pro ball in, like, what affects the Sixers in the next year. So pro basketball plus, potential top of the draft guys coming into 2016. I haven't watched it. I haven't been to a high school game in Philadelphia in like 3 years. So honestly, I couldn't tell you. My brother talks to me all the time. He goes to GFF. He's always talking to me about guys in Philly. He goes to a lot of games. But honestly, I just don't pay enough attention.
Okay. Well, speaking of the current Sixers, I see you tweeting about Furkan Aldemir a lot. What do you think this guy's ceiling is?
I feel like maybe I'd say Thiago Splitter would be his ceiling.
Wow.
Or maybe like Omer Asheik. I hate to compare him to two European white guys, but I just think that's kind of his game. I think that the 3-point shooting and whatever, I think that's kind of, I don't really put much stock into that, but I think if he can be a guy who can rebound and, be a hand straight up defender at the rim, I think that's fine for, I think his ceiling is probably like a end of the rotation kind of guy who plays 15, 20 minutes, but there's a place for that in the NBA.
Absolutely. On the subject, Robert Covington, he showed us so much last year. He showed great court vision, awareness. He was an excellent three-point shooter, and he even got you a few steals along the way. Really valuable player, and you don't really see too many players like him in the NBA. Now he enters his sophomore season. What do you think you're going to get out of Robert Covington this season and beyond?
So really, I was just funny enough, I was doing a projection with a few friends. We created a whole bunch of questions. What do you think the team's record's going to be this year? Do you think the 4 wins rookie of the year? A whole bunch of questions. And one of the ones that came up was who's going to lead the team in points, rebounds, and assists. I said points for Covington. Pretty much everyone else said Okafor. I think Covington's going to, he averaged, around 13 points a game last year, shooting almost 40% from three. I mean, I could see that efficiency staying similar, and I think he's expanded his game a lot. And you saw it toward the end of this year, and you've seen it in the preseason, that he's a guy who isn't just a catch-and-shoot guy. He can, almost like Chandler Parsons, he's kind of added that pump, fake, and drive game. I could see him averaging around 17 points a game, probably on the high end. And I think he's a guy who, he's going to stick around. He's valuable, so, I guess it's hard to say anyone's going to stick around just with where the team is and the kind of opportunist that I think he is. But, I think you should project him. Either as a guy will stick around, and if he doesn't stick around, it's because he's part of a bigger deal, to get the team over the hump. But, I think he's a guy who could start when this team really turns it around and is good. I think he's a guy who could be one of the starters on the team.
You mentioned Sam Hinkie. Based on your experience, what do you think he's really looking for? Because it seems like there's a philosophy change with the Sixers right now. You're getting a different breed of player. It seems like all the guys can do just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think he got miscast early on as a guy who just wants a bunch of freaks. He wants the KJ McDaniels of the world. He wants the Jakar Sampsons, these guys who come in with a ton of athleticism and upside, and or even like an FCW, like these guys who have it all, but this one thing, whether it's shooting or it's decision making. And I don't really know if that's true. I think that's kind of just how it shook out. And I think when you're looking for high upside players, that's kind of where you go. You go to the raw guys. But honestly, I think he's just looking for guys who can develop into either like Covington, who isn't going to be a superstar, but like he's looking for guys who will be here in 3 years, playing a role on a big team.
Right.
So that's a Robert Covington. That when you bring in a guy like Tony Roden, let's say a couple of years ago, you're hoping he can develop to the point where maybe he's Jamal Crawford is for the Clippers, and what Jamal Crawford's been for other playoff teams. When you're bringing in a Furkan Alderman, you're imagining, like I said, him being a 15-minute guy on a good team like the Spurs had early on with Thiago Splitter. And then, obviously, with the higher-end players, you're just trying to go for the guy. And I think that's true, like I said, for Embiid. You're just trying to go for the guys who can be franchise-changing. It doesn't really do much for, like, Trey Lyles, for example, the guy who's drafted by the Jazz. I forget exactly where he's picked this year, but, like, Trey Lyles, to me, I liked him coming out of college, but I just don't think there's a world in which Trey Lyles changes the lot of your franchise. The way that, like a Joel Embiid or like a guy who's selected in this draft a little bit later. But I see Trey Lyles as a very, like, he does a little bit of everything. Even with Bobby Portis, like, he's played really well, but, he just does a little bit of everything, and I think what the Sixers are looking for are franchise-altering players, and that's why you see a team like the Sixers select Dario Saric, have to wait on him at least 2 years, because their hope is when he does come over that they'll have gotten the top 6, top 7 caliber guy on a bargain. That's really what they're looking for, a bargain.
We're talking with Max Rappaport, formerly a writer for Sixers.com. You can read his tweets at Max Rappaport. He currently works for the Birds. Max, you mentioned a 15-minute guy. There's another guy who's very similar to that, and Isaiah Canaan. I'm a huge believer. This guy is from Murray State. Murray State runs a type of team where they really want athletes, and they just kind of out-physical everybody. This guy has a little bit of that, and he's got a little brains as well. I want to get your take on Isaiah Canaan and whether or not he has any pro prospects, because he seems to do just about a bit of everything, and he does it better than most in limited minutes.
I think you're going to see a lot of them simply because the team, their top 2 point guards are injured right now in Roden and Kendall Marshall. After that, I mean, you're talking about, like, it's Isaiah Cannon, and then it's, like, T.J. McConnell, Peter Jackson, whoever will Scotty Wilbekin, those guys, which maybe it's just 1 or 2. I think you're going to see a lot of Cannon, and, I mean, I think for him, probably the upside, like you said, putting in that, like, 15-minute grouping, I'd say, you know, maybe he's like a Patty Mills. Maybe he's like a spark off the bench. I think, like Patty Mills, he probably needs to become a better point guard. Like, right now, he's kind of an undersized shooting guard who plays the role of point guard for the Sixers. But, I mean, he is a really good shooter. He, similar to Lillard and T.J. McCollum, is like one of those guys who just killed, like one of those guards who just killed it at, you know, a smaller mid-major school. And, you know, now in the NBA, obviously, it's a completely different game. But I think there is a role for him, and I think if he can develop more as a point guard, like, you could see him come in spurts and have that kind of effect that he was able to have at Murray State.
Okay. Last question for you. Actually, I got 2 for you. Nick Stauskas, what do you think of this guy?
I like Nick Stauskas a lot. He was actually, going into last year's draft, he was the guy I really hoped would fall to 10 where the Sixers were selecting. I'm glad they got Sarge. I liked him a lot, too.
Mm-hmm.
But Stauskas was really a guy who was hoping to fall just because he still the need. And the team really needs shooting. And I think he can do a lot more than that. He's not just a shooter. And maybe even more so than Robert Covington. He has, like, the potential to be a really complete player. More like a Klay Thompson. Not that he's necessarily going to be at that level, but a guy who can handle the ball a little bit. His defense obviously isn't on that level, but offensively he has a pretty well-rounded game. Maybe like Kevin Martin would be like a better comparison, but I think he's a guy who can really...
That'd be great.
With Noel, and just with the need for shooting. You know, if it's him, if he comes back healthy, and it's, you know, I don't know who will play point guard, but if it's him and Covington and then Noel and Okafor, I think he can really thrive in that. I'm kind of shocked that they were able to get him for what they got him for. I mean, they really gave up nothing to give up Cap Space. That trade's kind of crazy to begin with, but then they just got, almost as a throw-in, they just got the guy who was drafted in the 8th last year. In the Kings, so I'm pretty excited about him.
Okay, last question for you, Max, before we let you go. Again, thank you very much for joining the program today. Who is in your NBA Finals? Who wins and why?
Good question. It's so hard to pick against the Warriors just because they were so good last year. I really like Steve Kerr. They haven't really lost anyone. I mean, they're pretty much the same team coming back. I have to say, though, the San Antonio Spurs just look so good. And, you know, it's funny because you say this every year, but like, nobody's talking about them. But they added LaMarcus Aldridge this year, and like nobody's even talking about it. It's crazy. You know, I think that between those two teams for me in the West, I think, you know, those two are a pretty noticeable cut above the rest.
So you would say the Western Conference Finals is your NBA championship, right?
Say that again?
You would say the Western Conference Final, or let's say the inevitable Western Conference Final of the Spurs and Warriors is your NBA Final, if you will. The two best teams going at it.
In a sense, but at the same time, like, I don't feel like we've even seen what the Cavs are to this point. I mean, they struggled so much last year. And you saw it, I guess, in 2010-11 with the Heat, where you didn't feel like you really, I mean, they lost the finals that year, struggled a lot in the first half of the season, probably not as much as the Cavs last year, but, you know, I think that second year with the Heat, that was when they really turned it on. I think if you can get Kyrie and Love healthy for the playoffs, I mean, I'd like to see how that team gels, because that team is as talented as those two things I just mentioned, but definitely between those three, those are my picks. I guess I'll go Spurs. I'll go Cavs over Spurs in the finals.
Whoa! You heard it here. There it is. Max Rappaport predicts the Cavs over the Spurs in the 2016 NBA Finals. That's Max Rappaport. He's formerly a writer for Sixers.com. You can follow his tweets at Max Rappaport. He also writes for your Philadelphia Eagles. Max, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. And please don't write that down. I'm sure that'll be wrong. That finals prediction.
Take care.